You're all very welcome to the launch of Crannóg number 51. We have 9 readers tonight between fiction and poetry, and we also have some music. We sometimes have music at Crannóg launches. We haven't had some for a while now. If we have time, sometimes if we have a lot of readers, we don't have time for music, but we'll make a little time tonight for a musical treat later on, about halfway through the proceedings. So we'll go straight to the readings. I need my glasses for this. And our first reader is a man who needs no introduction, certainly in a Galway audience, but I'll introduce him anyway. In fact, I'm going to give him the longest introduction of the evening. He is Kevin Higgins, and Kevin is co-organiser of Over the Edge literary events in Galway. He teaches poetry workshops at Galway Arts Centre. He teaches creative writing at Galway Technical Institute, and he is the creative writing director for the National University of Ireland, the Galway Summer School. He is the poetry critic of the Galway Advertiser, and his poetry is discussed in the Cambridge Introduction to Modern Irish Poetry, and his poetry also features in Identity Parade, New British and Irish Poets, published by Blood Axe in 2010. And he's also been published in The 100 Years' War, Modern War Poems, also published by Blood Axe in 2014. That year, in 2014, his poetry was the subject of an academic paper called The Case of Kevin Higgins, or The Present State of Irish Poetic Satire. And that was presented by David Wheatley at a symposium on satire at the University of Aberdeen. Another book, The Selected Satires of Kevin Higgins, was published by Nuash Gaelta in 2016, and a pamphlet of his political poems called The Minister for Poetry Has Decreed, that was published in 2016 by Culture Matters. The Stinging Fly magazine described him as likely the most read living poet in Ireland. He has published a total of 6 collections of poetry with Salmon. The most recent one was just this month, Sex and Death at Merlin Park Hospital, published just last week. So after that introduction, would you welcome, please, Kevin Higgins.
Thanks, Tony, and I thought I might die during that introduction. Thanks as well to Tony and Ger and co for allowing me to go first, because I have to run to MC the Over the Edge Fiction Slam at the kitchen at the museum after this. This poem it's one of the death poems. It's about the lungs, and it's after a poem by Christina Rossetti, who also had a few health problems, and it's called A Reckoning. My lungs are an accordion fallen out of tune, playing an air I've grown too used to. Pour me tall glass after tall glass of summer sea air, let me gulp them down with sliced strawberries. My lungs belong in a shop that sells second-hand bagpipes to the gullible. May the cigarette smoke and diesel fumes of others and the mould and stress I brought to the table myself all be detained in the lamp-lit interrogation room I'm building without planning permission at the bottom of the garden. My lungs are 2 talentless divas competing with each other for newspaper headlines. May everyone be arrested without warrant and made plead, because the bill for my life is on the mat. My lungs are rooms in which the yellow wallpaper is slowly falling down. My hates have come to get me and are busy printing the word guilty on every piece of paper they can find. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Yeah, I forgot to mention the reason why Kevin was reading first is he has to leave early to go to the museum, or the kitchen in the museum, where the Over the Edge Fiction Slam is on at 8 o'clock. So our second reader is Mary Melvin Gehigan, again no stranger to Crannóg launches. Mary has 5 collections of poetry published. Her most recent one was published in 2018, and it's called As Moon and Mother Collide. That was published by Salmon. Her work has been widely published in places like Poetry Ireland Review, the Sunday Times, the Stinging Fly, the Moth, the Stony Thursday Book, and Crannóg previously, Skylight 47, in the Hodges and Figgis 250th Anthology, which was published in 2018. She's also been published in Ciphers and on Poems on the Dart. She won the Longford Festival Award for Poetry in 2013. She was shortlisted in 2015 for the Court's New Writing Prize and also for the Francis Ledwidge Poetry Award. In 2017, she was shortlisted for the Fish Poetry Award and also for the Rush Poetry Award. And in 2018, she was shortlisted for the Pádraig Cullen Poetry Prize. She is a member of the Writers in Schools scheme with Poetry Ireland, and she has edited several anthologies of children's poetry. Would you welcome, please, Mary Melvin Gehigan. Could I just say, when you're coming up to read, first of all, you have to come up here because this area is out of bounds. It's all set up for music later on. But also be careful, there are some cables here, so don't trip over those. Our Arts Council grant won't cover the insurance.
Tony, thank you very much for that welcome, and it's lovely to be back here in Galway at Crannóg, and it's around the time of my birthday, so my partner always brings me down and we stay over, and it's a lovely opportunity, and I'm so full of gratitude towards the team at Crannóg, and especially to Ger and Tony, and for giving me a reason to be here, and also an opportunity to hear new work and to meet and listen to everybody. This poem, Putting a Face to Limerick, I visited Limerick recently with Ferdy, and the first stop was the Hunt Museum, and I saw a little Viking hammer, and that hammer took me on a trail. Putting a Face to Limerick. In the Hunt Museum, a miniature Viking hammer nails the photo of Hannah Ora Walsh as she could or might have been before lost on a famine ship, created by the artist Beth Nagel. Later in St. Mary's Cathedral, there's a holding of breath at a dusty opening on the north transept, where lepers in medieval times were allowed to receive communion. And round the corner, at King John's Castle, the burden of occupation from Viking, Norman and English times is as solid as the enormous stone battlements that keep the Shannon out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary, for that. Our next reader has, I would say, the shortest bio of the evening. He is Cian Ferreter, and his bio says that Cian recently completed an Arvan poetry course, and he lives in Dublin. So would you welcome, please, the very modest Cian Ferreter.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here. I have to say, this is the first time I've ever done something like this, which probably explains the brevity of the bio, and perhaps explains the brevity of the piece you're about to hear. I was telling my teenage kids I was coming down to Galway to read a poem, and when the laughter died down 10 or 15 minutes later, there was a bit of curious questioning about this whole exercise. They thought this idea that people would gather in a public space and listen to poems to be a rather quaint one. And I pointed out to them as the rap was blaring out of the speakers that perhaps they're doing the same thing in different ways. I was last in the Crane Bar here over 25 years ago on particularly raucous student weekend. And there's a little bit of kind of cultural atonement I hope is going to take place this evening, because I got a tap on the shoulder about 1 in the morning when it was maybe 4 verses into a particularly awful rendition of a particularly awful ballad, with the suggestion that I might be better off finishing the ballad to the seagulls out in Salt Hill. So I haven't been here since. I'm delighted to see the place hasn't changed, because and it's a credit to it. And I hope if you don't get something out of this, maybe the seagulls will. It's called Hem, and I hope it speaks for itself. I should say I'm down here with my beloved Deirdre, who is the inspiration for this. So it's called Hem. Evenings when you were not yet back, I'd sit on the makeshift bench in the yard of our first house, where you'd hung a line with room for just one dress, and close my eyes and wait for the breeze to lift your hem against my knees.
Thank you very much, Cian. That was really lovely. Short, as you say, really lovely. I think the seagulls can go hungry, I think. So our next reader is Ria Collins, and Ria has been published in Skylight 47, in A New Ulster, in Bangor Literary Journal, and in Poethead. She was shortlisted for Over the Edge New Writer of the Year in 2016, and she was longlisted in 2017 and again in 2018. She was shortlisted for Poems for Patients in 2017 and again in 2018. And also that year she was shortlisted for Bray Literary Festival Poetry Competition. She performed a collaboration of her work with music at the Courts International Festival of Literature in 2018. So would you welcome please to read a poem, Ria Collins.
Thanks, Tony. Good evening. First of all, thank you very much to all of the editors for including me in this edition. I'm lucky to be here. I got locked into my house as opposed to getting locked out of it this evening. And anyway, I'm here. So this is a poem in memory of my mother, and it's called Now That You're Gone. The crows in the belfry croak their chilled call. The clouds above shudder with cold. I left you looking for me across stars at night, throwing holy water that fell to the ground, while I rode camels through the desert, escaping the parched boredom like a balloonist, distant and removed in motion. My letters neatly ordered in a drawer, I trace unguent Vicks and pills and half-used face cream, touch-worn rosary beads and medals, hair strands in your comb, pink lipstick almost used, lace handkerchief in a drooping pocket of your worn and faded gown, perfumed with lavender, the new one I gave you neatly folded amongst the unused thermal vests, torn out pages of recipes spill like bruised memories across a blue pane. Sometimes I pretend you're still here, labelling warm marmalade jars in the kitchen, the younger you, full of laughter, chasing us out to school after breakfast of porridge and Clonakilty black pudding, is a faded make-believe in ochre. Yes, you pushed your self-righteous, exhausted torrent of despair on us. When I travelled the distance to visit, 5 days invariably became 2. But I miss you like an amputated limb that burns and stings with real imaginings. The bell peals for mass and the rooks take flight. Rain pours, I hide in your room, unseen. It will pass, as all things, leaving only its scent behind, a lingering trace of having been.
Okay, thank you, Ria. Thank you for that. That was lovely. Our next reader is Knut Skinner. Knut's poetry has appeared widely in Ireland, Britain, Australia, and North America. He is the author of 16 books of verse, including a collected edition called 50 Years, Poems 1957 to 2007, which appeared from Salmon. He also has a memoir called Help Me to a Getaway, which was published by Simon also in 2010. His most recent book is called The Life That I Have, also by Salmon, that was published in 2018. Would you welcome, please, Knut Skinner. I might say, I remember when Knut Skinner came from America, because he came to live near Innistimon, where I grew up. And as a teenager, he was the first and at that time only living poet that we had ever come across. So he was certainly a rarity in those days.
Thank you, Tony. And now you see them everywhere in Innistimon. Let's see. Oh yes. This poem was inspired by a sign in a hotel room toilet. The sign said, "Think before you flush." What about? The Alpine route of Hannibal? Those elephants must have been quite a challenge. Or Moses breaking the tablets? He was human, was he not? Or Hurling's great goalkeeper, Davy Fitzgerald? Not many slithers got past him. I think that is enough, and it's time to flush.
Okay, thanks very much, Knut, for that. Yes, there are quite a few poets around in this time now, I'm sure. Okay, we're going to take a short break, help you to cool down. You can visit the watering hole on this warm summer's evening. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we will have some music, a very nice short musical treat for you, and a few more readings after that. We're going to make a start on part 2. We're going to make a start on part 2. We're going to start the second half with some musical treats for you. We have Paul Maloney, who hails all the way from Tuam, home of the Saw Doctors and many other musical talents. And Paul is going to play some of his original stuff, which is kind of blues. Would you call it bluesy? Cross between Bob Dylan and
It's the middle of the road now. It's so middle of the road. I could get run over anytime.
Okay, middle of the road, and he could get run over. Okay, would you welcome, please, Paul Maloney?
My name is Paul Maloney. Thank you, Crannóg. I'm almost embarrassed to call myself a songwriter in such auspicious company, but here goes. This is my Sunday song. Around you are losing our heads and you're not losing yours. the sun is shining down on you, and the world is yours. Like a month of Sundays with nothing to do, I'm taking it easy here with you, and we're taking it easy. See that guy fishing by the stream, and catching nothing, just the fishing that he needs. Like a month of Sundays with nothing to do, he's taking it easy, like me and you, and we're taking it easy. Look at that kid bouncing on his trampoline, ain't going nowhere, doesn't care where he's been. Like I'm on the Sundays with nothing to do, he's taking it easy, like me and you, we're taking it easy. Hot summer's day and the sun is bitten the stones. Here comes the ice cream man, so we'll be eating ice cream cones. Like I'm on the Sundays, nothing to do, we're taking it easy, me and you, and we're taking it easy. I'm just here doing what I do, playing guitar for me, singing for you. Like I'm on the Sundays with nothing to do, we're taking it easy, me and you, and we're taking it easy.
Perfect. Great. Okay, thank you very much, Paul, for that. That's Paul Maloney from Sweden. So now for a total change of pace, we're going to have a story. And stories from Mary Lennon. And Mary writes fiction, and she also writes poetry and non-fiction. She co-authored Across the Water, Irish Women's Immigration to Britain, and that was published by Virago. She was a runner-up in the Sean of Whalon competition, and she was shortlisted and longlisted for the Fish competition and the Colm Toveen competition, and she was the winner of the Listowel Poetry Prize. And she teaches creative writing in Dublin. So to read her story, would you welcome please Mary Lennon.
I'm delighted to be published in Crannóg, and I'm delighted to be here in the Crane Bar tonight, and I've come all the way from Dublin. I would also like to add that my mother's from Mayo, so my west of the Shannon credentials are absolutely impeccable. Okay. The title of my short story is called Forever After. Okay. Early family photographs are unreliable. Heads missing, feet in focus. Or heads in, faces blurry, like we're not fully there. We worked out later that my mother leaned forward when she pressed the button, and oops went the heads, and oopla came the feet. Then Caroline, the eldest, took over, and there we all are, heads and feet. The last photograph from that time is of my Holy Communion. White dress, veil, bolero, all Caroline's hand-me-downs, but shiny white shoes, white lacy socks, all brand new. We're in the back garden in the merry month of May. Mam holding Stevie, Dad in his suit, me, Kieran, Sylvie, all there, except Caroline, who's behind the lens, fixing us in time. Each of us has an enlarged, framed copy of that photograph. The last one before the bad times. Before our father, well, went missing, is what the Gardaí and the newspapers called it. Missing, missing, missing. Saturday afternoon, he went to Whelan's pub with his friend Joe to watch Arsenal play. Everyone said he was in good form. Then he left to collect his winnings at the bookie. But he didn't come back. Not that day, the next, or the weeks, months after. Not forever after. And for us, everything changed forever after. Sergeant O'Brien was in charge. He talked to us, the neighbours, to people at Dad's work. Father Frawley called, said we should pray for him. The Gardaí searched with dogs who sniffed Dad's vest and carried his scent. GAA pitches in case he took a walk and fell. Back lanes in case he was robbed, left unconscious. The canal in case he'd fallen in. Mam and Uncle Jimmy went on TV, which we watched, piled together on the sofa. Mam was crying. If you're out there, Thomas, please get in touch, please. Joe got neighbours together to search the Dodder Banks, a place they used to go fishing. Tireless efforts, the newspapers said, but nothing, nothing, nothing. Our house was full of empties. Empty chair at the table, empty side of Mam and Dad's bed, empty shaving cream, empty tobacco box, empty gone fishing mug, which Caroline hid. Uncle Jimmy took us for drives on Sunday mornings, and Aunt Nancy came Wednesdays to play cards. At school, the principal, our teachers, even the girls and boys came and said, "Sorry about your dad," like their mums and dads told them to. Everybody was sorry. Maria Byrne brought me in a skipping rope with flashing handles from her dad's shop. Sorry, sorry, sorry. When we went to Mass or the cinema, people who didn't know us now knew us because they'd seen us in the newspapers, and they stared. They're the children of the missing man. Caroline got annoyed. I'm sick of it. They should mind their own business. Slowly, everyone except my mother got tired of searching, looking, hoping. Jimmy and Nancy visited less. Sergeant O'Brien stopped calling, just phoned. There were no clues. Our father had disappeared into thin air. It was around that time we began to call him our father, not Dad anymore. At school, they got tired too of being sorry. In the yard, Senan McCabe said, "E.T. must have got your dad." And it moved like wildfire. Some laughed, giggled, others snickered behind their hands, pretending not to be laughing, while me and Sylvie cried and got taken to the principal's office. She gave us tissues to wipe our eyes, Kit Kat and Fanta to cheer us up, told us that Senan would be in trouble with her. But he meant no harm, was just being thoughtless. Thoughtless, thoughtless, thoughtless. Then Stevie got bronchitis and had to go to hospital. And when he came home, he had to stay in bed. After school, Mam was lying in the bed with him. "I can't let him out of my sight," she said. Then Sylvie got sick, stayed home. The following week, me and Kieran got it, and finally, Caroline too. "They've all got that flu that's going around," Mam told the principal on the phone. Then she put us all in her big bed, top and tailing, and dragged in the single bed from the box room for herself. She stayed with us most days, only getting up to boil eggs for breakfast, soup for lunch, sausages and potatoes for dinner. We didn't mind being sick, glad to be away from school, reading comics, playing games and other stuff. Then, on a Sunday, our grandmother arrived from Ballina. Tommy Lavelle, Mam's cousin, drove her up, stopped for tea and sandwiches and drove back down again. That evening, Grandma made our tea and told us we'd been in bed long enough, needed to get our skates on. Sylvie nearly laughed, which would have started us all off, but she held it in. We went back to school on Monday in our brushed down uniforms, and when we came home, the house was clean, washing hung on the line, and a pot of stew was on the stove. Only Mam didn't get up. She just lay in bed, facing the wall, saying she was dead tired. Dr. Brennan came each day for a week to make sure she took her tablets. Stevie followed grandmother around, moved every time she moved, wouldn't let me or Caroline pick him up. Grandma dandled him on her lap and sang "The Yellow Rose of Texas," which he loved, and we all sang with her. After a few weeks, we got used to Grandma being in charge, and Mam got up some evenings. It was a Saturday. Saturdays are not good days in our family, when Grandma and Mam had their big fight. Only me and Caroline heard it, listening with the bedroom door ajar. Grandma was very cross, telling Mam she'd stayed in bed long enough, couldn't sleep her life away, and Mam kept crying and saying, "I can't do it, I can't do it." Then Grandma shouted, "Are you going to leave those children like he did?" Caroline went stiff next to me, but Grandma hadn't finished. "You know where they'll end up, don't you? Defenceless in some orphanage." The words were splinters of ice, like after Caroline read me the Ice Cream Queen story when I was little and I got nightmares. I felt blue with cold, didn't look at Caroline in case she'd frozen too. Grandma stayed for months while Mam slowly got back on her feet, she called it. And so we escaped the clutches of the Ice Queen and stayed together in our own house. In time, our story became old news, wore itself out and faded from view. I live in London now, where nobody knows or cares about missing fathers. Some of my new friends have absent fathers, the ones who don't go missing, just aren't around much. I work in a fashion studio in Covent Garden. They take the mick out of me at home. Covent Garden, ooh la la, as though it's Buckingham Palace. But underneath, they're pleased. I've worked my ass off since college, interning, waitressing, interning again, to get a 1-year contract with CAF. Chloe, Aisha, Franco, 3 hot, young Brit designers, the Mail declared them recently. I fetch, carry, sew, administrate, but I'm learning loads. And earn enough to cover a rent in a shared house in Peckham and a budget lifestyle. And I absolutely love London. Well, I loved it until a fortnight ago when I was mugged on the London Underground. A Thursday, I left work earlier than usual, got a seat on the train and began people watching. Much harder to do when you're clinging to an overhead rail. The usual cosmopolitan crowd, but my attention was taken by a young boy engrossed in Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, who reminded me of my nephew Cian. He was dressed in a green school uniform, had dark hair, long lashes, and was very beautiful. I wanted to sketch him, something I hadn't been doing since college. But how could I without him noticing? He raised his eyes once, sensing my attention. Light brown they were. Then resumed reading. As the train approached his station, he closed his book, and a man further along got up, and together they moved towards the door. I gave the man a cursory glance. Greying hair, 60s, grandfather maybe, and forever after. I won't know why I did it, but I looked at him again, and something hot, like a burning rod, jabbed at my chest. And as the doors wheezed open, I was on my feet, following them. They took the escalator and exited onto a busy high street I didn't know. I kept them in sight, stopping to look in shop windows if they slowed. All the time, outside of myself, robotic, compelled. For several minutes, they walked straight ahead before they entered an Asian supermarket. I stopped, stared into the Oxfam window, seeing only my own white, ghostly face. When they reappeared, the boy had an ice cream cone, the man a newspaper, which he rolled and put into the pocket of his jacket. The movement brought the hot jab to my chest again, and I was bent double, had to lean against the cold brick wall to stay on my feet. I'd gone far enough, I knew it. I'd gone too far. But as if my life depended on it, I straightened up and was following again. But they disappeared, and now a scream was building in my throat. Right or left? Right or left? It had to be one or other. But which? Which? I took the right onto a long, tree-lined street, and ahead, unbelievably, there they were, still walking. I followed. Then, quite quickly, they turned left onto a shorter street, lined with low, mock Tudor-style houses. I held back before I turned left too. Halfway down, they went in through a gateway, and might have disappeared inside if the man hadn't stopped to fumble for keys. I walked fast, faster, drew closer, until I was at the gate. His back was turned. He didn't see me. Might never have seen me, except I spoke. One word, loudly. Dad? He heard it, and froze. My wise heart began pounding against my ribcage, urging escape from the long, long moment as he slowly turned to face me. He was ashen, looked aghast with fear. Caroline? The voice was familiar from down a long tunnel of far away, but it had a new sound on it, a London sound. Amy. Suddenly the boy moved forward, pulled at his sleeve. Dad, are we not going in? I'd forgotten the beautiful boy, but his words, like a metallic screech, stunned me, and I was going to slide to the ground, be trapped outside that house forever, unless I ran. But I couldn't move, was stuck to the pavement, while words from the man were floating towards me, words I couldn't hear, wouldn't hear, not one single word. I grabbed the low wall, held onto it to stagger away, almost falling. Then grabbed the next wall, the next, then each wall after, until gasping for air, legs shaking, I limped my way towards the end of that endless street. Mornings, I wake to the picture in the garden, us all smiling in the sun. Remember Caroline squinting behind the lens, telling us what to do. Then I touch the cold lump inside my chest, and that helps. I get up, go to work as usual. I don't lie facing the wall. I know where that leads. But I fear for the others if I tell. And if I don't tell, I must make myself unknow it, as he did.
Thank you, Mary. That was such a great story. Riveting. We have 3 poets left for the evening. The next one is, its reader is Billy Fenton. Billy writes poetry and short stories, and his work has been published in the Irish Times, Poetry Ireland Review, and in Cattails. And he was shortlisted in 2018 for a Hennessy Award. So would you welcome, please, Billy Fenton.
So firstly, I'd like to thank the editors at Crannóg for accepting my poem and publishing my poem, Greenhouse. I don't think that, hopefully this poem doesn't need much explanation really, so I'm not really going to say much about it apart from read it. And I'd like to read it for all people that have loved and lost. So Greenhouse. It's something you always wanted, but never had. When the hedge is up, we'll put one in, you used to say. Today the man came, a damp Saturday in January, a cold, shivering day. 4 hours later, you had your wish. After he left, I went to the garden. You were there, as clear as day, in the centre of your new greenhouse. The light of summer around you, the climb of plants about you. You pop a tomato between your teeth, put your arms around me, pass it into my mouth. I close my eyes, feel your mouth on mine, the taste of you on my tongue, the sweetness of tomato as I bite. When I open my eyes, the greenhouse is gleaming new, but empty. Where did you go? Where did you plant your box of wishes? So I can fill this greenhouse up with new life. Fill it up with the beat of your heart.
Thank you, Billy, for that. And our next poet is Laura Ann Caffrey. Laura is a teacher and a poet, and she has been published in various magazines, including previously in Crannóg, in the Steen Fly and the Galway Review. And in 2018 she was shortlisted for the Coach New Writing Prize. So welcome please, Laura Caffrey.
Thank you very much. 10 years ago, I sent out the very first poem that I ever sent anywhere, and I sent it to Crannóg and they published it for me. So I want to say a big thank you to Crannóg for that. It's lovely to be in the summer edition. It's beautiful. So congratulations to the Crannóg team, and it's really nice to be in such good company. The only thing I think you need to know about this poem is that the callows that are mentioned in it, it's an area of grassy wetland along the banks of the Shannon that wading birds tend to favour for going about their business. Caretaker of the callows, for Sean. In late spring and early summer he rows the small wooden boat to Inishee across a narrow run of Shannon waters from mainland to island to mend fences. Ashore he wades through meadow grasses, sedge and water mint, the greater nest in which lapwing, redshank and curlew call and choose to perform the precarious task of raising their young. All day he works on wire and electric cables, the boundary between the delicate manoeuvrings of avian life and the hungry traipsing of larger beings. This fence, a freedom in confines, is never done. Cattle scratching bend the fence too low, or scrub growth compromises the current, so he must work, strengthening, reconnecting, protecting these unknowing birds until light fades and he can work no more. He downs his tools, makes his way back, only to find that some creature has gnawed through cable back where he started. It is work for tomorrow, where there are always more fences to mend. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Our next reader, our last reader of the evening, is Marita Woods. And Marita has been writing poetry and short stories for many years and has been published in reviews and anthologies. Her stories won Hennessy Awards and Francis McManus Awards in the 1990s. Her last collection, published by Astrolabe, is called A Constant Elsewhere of the Mind. Lovely title. So would you welcome, please, Marita Woods.
I'd like to say thank you very much to Tony and to Ger and Jarvis and everybody else associated with Crannóg. It's a lovely production and I'm really delighted to be in it. And it gives me a reason to come to Galway and a reason to believe in poetry and all that sort of thing. Now this poem, some of the words will sound familiar to you, but it's called Hail Marys. Those first grown-up years you left the Hail Marys at home, lodged in a purse from someone else's trip to Lourdes. But they followed you along the broad and shining path, disguising the hour of our death. Now you're grateful they stayed the course, refused rebuffs. When the first clay falls on the coffin, they gabble themselves. Other women called Mary take your arm. They know how to shelter figures in newly borrowed black coats, people like you who've lost men and mothers and dreams. Now and then grace bursts out from between clouds and wizened trees, reminding you of the possibility of fruitfulness. The final chapter takes place on one of those blue symmetrical hills straight from a Giotto painting. The Lord, though somewhere within, plays hard to get, reluctant to commit, absorbed in his divinity, I surmise. As the olive harvest shrinks, you stake out patience and wait for a shard of grace named Maria.
Okay, thank you, Marita. That brings us to the end of the evening, and I just have to thank everybody who read this evening, and indeed everybody who contributed to Crannóg, who were not reading this evening. Thanks to the musician, Paul Maloney. I think Paul has left. Also, I'd like to thank the cover artist, Roisin Coyle, Galway woman as well. The piece is entitled Charon. Charon was the boatman who ferried the dead to Hades. And it seems if you didn't pay, you remained there, and if you did pay, you came back. So if you buy Crannóg, you will get out of hell. Otherwise, you're in hell. Only joking. I'd like to thank Damien Burke, our filmmaker, who makes all the films that we have up on our website of various launches. And you'll also find them on YouTube on the Crannóg, what do they call it? Channel, that's it. Okay, I must thank the Crane Bar. I forgot to thank them at the last launch. I must thank the Crane Bar for their hospitality over many years. We've had practically all our launches up here, upstairs in the Crane, and they've been very good to us. So thank you very much for the Crane Bar. Thanks to my fellow editors, Ger Burke, Charlie Fahy down here, and our fourth editor is in Canada, Sandra Bunting. And Sandra is an artist as well, so she locates the artwork for the covers. Thanks to the Arts Council for their funding, and also to James Harland and the Galway City Arts Office who fund us as well. Without that, we just couldn't. We'd probably be online. We certainly wouldn't be in print. And thank you finally yourselves, the audience. But you always make such a great evening of a Crannóg launch. So thank you very much indeed. And see you at the next launch.